they said Keter Sanctuary was a unaffordable nation. They also said that $150 for a brand new Vanguard game was way too much for just to wait 3 months for DLC. Well, I say, just get good, bro. No lose intended. Hey, what is up, guys? It's not Ahmed004 here because unfortunately he's still sick, so he's still recovering. So in the meantime, we will go through. Is Faye the Fourth? Hello. You know, saying hello to myself, but yes, this is our Gramgrace deck profile. So I know this is something that a lot of you have been asking for, and a lot of you have been looking forward to very much. But to truth be told, this build has gone through many iterations, and I must say that up for now, without the promo, Gramgrace is looking as somewhere is a mid tier 2 to tier 3 deck. That's not saying it's bad. It's just saying that you need to temper your expectations. This isn't the next coming of Youthberg. This is the next coming of Chronojet. This is just a solid Keter Sanctuary that you can build straight out of the past three sets, which is the build that we'll be showing you. Of course, there are upgrade options, but for now, we're just gonna go through a build that you can pretty comfortably obtain with just even if you just started Vanguard, in June or whatever, or you're playing English, you just started Youthberg a few weeks ago. So, for our right line, we are playing one Tegra starter. You can play any starter, honestly. Tegra starter is good to throw people. We're playing Beneath the Light Tegra, the grade 1. So she only has the abilities that when ridden on top by the grade 2 Tegra, you look at the top card of your deck, and if it's a grade 2 or lower unit, you may call it to a Vanguard Circle as rest. Otherwise, you leave it on top. So note how is you may call. So it means that if it's a trigger, you can actually leave it on top. It's not like Blaster Javelin where you have to call it. And also is that if it's an order or if it's a grade 3, you can also leave it on top. And then you can draw it, or if you're playing Tegra, you're supposed to play the order which will let you use the order to see if you want to draw it. But then we're not playing Tegra, so we can only either leave it on top and then draw it for a dry check, or we can call it to a Vanguard Circle. And of course, we are playing Sword Set Knight Gramgrace. Ours is from Dear Days, as you can see, because it's the FFR. So Gramgrace is an interesting unit that we got from Dear Days, and I will say that it definitely is something that Keter Sanctuary has been looking for quite a long time. It's just generic multi-attack and plusing power. And so it does need quite a lot of good board setup, and then not having any right line and not having any specific support does hurt it a bit. But for what it's worth, the card quality is so strong that you can build an entire deck around it, which is very good. So its first ability is that when you persona right, your back row also gains the +10 as well. So it's the same as Sec 7 and the double rank that Magnolia got during Sec 7. You basically give your entire field +10, which means that your columns each get +20 in net total. So that is pushing for a lot of power, especially in Keter Sanctuary where surprisingly not a lot of units actually get that much power unless it's in Bastion, of course. Its second ability is once per turn, Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. Draw a card, choose a card from your hand and call it, and if you call to center back, that unit in the center back row can attack from the back row. So let's say for illustrative purposes, let's say you called this Tegra. The Tegra will be able to swing from the center back row, which means that it's a generic 4 attacks in Keter Sanctuary every single turn, as long as you can pay the cost, which you might be saying, I'm paying 1 soul a turn, there's no way I'll be able to keep up. Keter Sanctuary only has $15 soul charges, so there's no way I'll be able to afford it. The third ability is, at the end of the battle that your center back row unit attack, put that card into your soul and draw a card. So it's not a cost. So even if there is no unit in the back row, so let's say Katwala or any other unit that kills itself through its own ability, disappears from this circle, you do not need to put it into the action to put it into the soul is not actually required. So you still draw. No. It doesn't work. No, because the unit that if it disappears, you still complete the action because it is not a cost. It is just a consequence of the effect that is you put it into the soul and then you draw a card. So So if you are gonna play Katwala in this deck, just note that you do not have to actually know that you still can use Gramgrace's skill, but then if you decide to use Katwala's skill after that, Katwala actually requires himself to be retired. So there's no unit to be retired, you can't actually use Katwala's skill. But in the event that this unit disappears or whatever, that it gets retired or what, Dinah Griffin, you can still use the skill to draw. So in the end, Gramgrace as a one card nets you 2 drive checks, as well as it draws you 1 from the CB1 Soul Blast one, and it also draws you another card when you put the back row into the soul, and then you put the back row unit into the soul. So it's 4 attacks, as well as it also draws you, basically nets you 4 cards every turn, which is very, very strong for Keter Sanctuary, which usually only net 0, as well, which usually either net 0s or minuses heavily, as ergo, look at Bastion. You might be asking me, why am I not playing the most generic right line in all of Keter Sanctuary, which is Blaster Dart and Blaster Javelin. So the thing about Gramgrace, unfortunately, is that it is very, very, very Color Blast heavy. Like, as a deck, it needs so many resources just to function properly that if you were to waste 1 turn playing Blaster Dart, as well as playing the Counter Blast, not only will you might not even hit anything on the Twin Drive, you will also end up getting damage choke if you in the event that you try to push on the Blaster Dart turn, because if you have Twin Drive, you most likely want to call a unit in case they do to pass your Vanguard and you only get 1 trigger, so you want to call another Rearguard, then you can get damage denied. And if Gramgrace gets damage denied, the card is a vanilla. It's a complete vanilla, you cannot do anything with it. So that is the reason why I chose the Daggra right line, is you just have either a generic +1, or you keep the trigger on top and you can pressure your opponent for the trigger if they want to take it. And if you see a personal right on top, that's even better. You can just get the personal right out with some options that we have in the deck. Alright. So now we move on to our other grade 3s. We are, of course, this is the personal right reliant deck. We play 3 other copies of Gramgrace, including the one in the right deck, and we play 4 copies of Gwendolyn. So Gramgrace, I already mentioned, personal right is quite key in this deck. Of course, don't in terms of mulliganing for the personal right, it's not necessary because of the amount of cards that you actually draw in this deck. But if you see in your mulligan and you are fighting a deck that doesn't really early rush you, it is actually quite okay to keep it in your starting hand, and then you can just pressure your opponent even harder turn 4 onwards. Then moving on to Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is actually a Bastion card that we got in set 7, and is easily the best finisher for this deck that we have. So Gwendolyn's ability is that when it attacks, if you persona roll this turn, Gramgrace persona rights, it's a persona reliant deck, you're probably gonna get it off. She gains 5k, and when your opponent would guard from their hand, he or she must guard with 2 or more cards from hand at the same time in order to guard. So basically it's Battle Dore, but the thing about it is that, as I said, Gramgrace gives 20k to the entire column, as well as Gwendolyn also gains 10k from Gramgrace's effect when it's caught from the center back row. Because it gains 10k, that means it's going to be swinging for minimum 38k on your personal right turn, which is a very, very hard number. It's a 30k guard. There's no single card. Your opponent will have double carded guard anyway, but it's a very awkward number for them to guard, because either they have to drop 2 15s, or they have to drop a 20 and like a 50 or if they want the PG, is even worse because they have to drop 3 cards to PG. So Gwendolyn is of course very strong in a deck that pluses so much numbers as well as pluses so many cards to hand, so that even if you're saving this for turn 4 or turn 5, you don't really feel the pinch that much of not having enough hand. And overall, she is quite good to see later on in the game. Moving on to our grade 2s, we play 3 copies of Maradu. Yes, Maradu. 4 copies of Kybre, 1 copy of Hush Training Daggra in the right deck, as well as 4 copies of our new counter charger from set 8, which is Tanaluru. Okay, so we'll go over the obvious ones first. So we'll play Daggra, as I mentioned before. We write the grade 2 on top of the grade 1. You get to look at the top card and call it as rest, or you leave it on top if it's a grade 3, or you want to just leave it on top as the trigger. As for Kybre is a generic superior caller that we got in set 7, and I understand actually like he's actually going up quite a bit in price, but if you manage to snag a copy of him early in set 7 when he was still relatively not played and relatively forgotten about, he is a very generic card to put in any Keter Sanctuary deck that basically is built around playing generics. So his skill is when placed, counter blast 1, soul blast 1. So it's when placed from anywhere. It doesn't have to be from hand, it doesn't have to be from field from superior core specifically. It can be from anywhere. So you can trigger it off Gramgrace's ability to call it as rest from the top deck. Is counter blast 1, soul blast 1. You look at the top 3 cards of your deck. You reveal a grade 2 or lower normal unit from among them and superior call it, or you add it to your hand. So when they mean or, it means that if the card that you chose to reveal does not fit any condition, that does not fit the condition of grade 2 or lower normal unit, so it means it's either a grade 3 or it's an order. So order, you can actually add Elementaria Sanctitude from the top 3 into your hand, so it can fetch you a PG, but mainly you use it to fill your board extremely quickly because this is a very board reliant deck, and because you are playing the Tigreal right line, you're not as constrained by counter blast as you would be if you played Blaster Dark. So Kyber can really just help you fill the entire board very quickly and so as swarm and then start beating your opponent as fast as possible and getting the most out of Gramgrace's Persona right buff. So overall, Kyber is really not a no-brainer for this deck. You just have to pace him out properly and use him when you have the counter blast and not starve yourself. Then we have our attack option, which is 3 copies of Maraudew. So Maraudew is also another card we got in set 7, a relatively forgotten common that we got. When his attack hits a Vanguard, choose one of your opponent's units and put it to the bottom of the deck. So Gramgrace, as much as it gains a lot of power, as much as it pushes for a lot of damage, it doesn't really have a lot of field control. So if you're fighting a deck like Bastion, like Office, or even like something like very simple like Zorga, you can actually, if you have no way to remove, like attack their rear guards or like remove key pieces on their board, and you cannot kill them that turn, you're 100% probably going to die the following turn. So by having some on-hit pressure for removal, you do actually not only force your opponent to guard a lot more awkwardly. So let's say like you have Maraudew and you have a Gwendolyn. Maraudew will force your opponent to guard, and Gwendolyn will make it very difficult for your opponent to guard. So the dichotomy there is that either way or another, your opponent will minus in some way. Either they have to throw a lot of cards on their hand or they will lose one of their units. And Gramgrace pumps your column so much that on hits really will actually hit more often. Like on hits will actually go off more often than not. So Maraudew is pretty much a quite good budget option for this deck, which we're trying to build out of the box for set 6 to set 8. Speaking of set 6 to set 8, we have our new counter charger, which is Tana Luru. At the end of the battle that was boosted, so haha, Ember clone for G-Era fans. If you had 3 or more face down damage, so basically if you spend 3 counter blasts this game, and if you have 3 face down counter blasts, you put it into the soul and you counter charge 1. So it's basically just a non-on-hit version of Forsat, because Forsat CCs 1 and soul charges 1, and he's resist, whereas she puts herself to soul, so she removes herself on the field so he can't get retired, and then also it soul charges 1 and then also counter charges 1. So it's a 1-for-1. So it also 1-for-1 gives you back Kyber's resource. So if you had used Kyber and you had 3 or more damage, you can just use her and then get back the resource to use Kyber again the following turn. As well as it also refunds Gramgrace's cost. Gramgrace is also counter blast 1, soul blast 1. So overall, Tana Luru is very good in any Keter Sanctuary deck, but very specifically in this version of the deck, it is very strong for Gramgrace, because you will be spamming a lot of CB to use Kyber, to use Gramgrace almost every single turn, and just being able to plus the soul very easily is very good for almost no restriction besides having 3 or more counter blasts, which the amount of CB that we are using, you will definitely hit this condition very easily. As for our grade 1s, we are playing 1 Elementario Sanctitude, 3 Aegisma, which is 3 upgraded PG, 4 Melcoco, and 4 copies of the 13k booster from set 7. So, and of course, that one Tiger on the right deck, as explained before. PGs are PGs. We are playing Sanctitude because Kyrie can search it out, as well as also, you know, for the Flagbird matchup, as well as to fight Jet, as well as any great 4 decks that are still running out in the wild. Bless your soul, Magnolia Inlet players. Mel Coco is here because, you know, we are not gonna assume that you can afford Painkiller, so, you know, we have the much better option for this deck, but I can understand why Painkiller is more popular, because in the end Gravidia is still a, because, you know, because Gravidia is still a very, very strong threat in this meta. Chrono Jet, Youthberg, a lot of things in this meta have removal, so the fact that Painkiller removes herself relieves you a lot of pressure of just losing a piece on the board. Mel Coco's skill is that when placed from anywhere, so yes, it also can be triggered from Tigra's ability. So blast 1, draw a card, and then choose one card from your hand and discard it. So it's a cycle that lets you at least draw first before you actually have to choose what to discard, and it's a piece that stays on the board. Unlike Painkiller, it's a -1, whereas Painkiller is a net 0 because Painkiller kills herself to draw a card. But because Gramgrace is a board reliant deck, you do actually want the pieces to stay on the board so that you can use them the following turn as boosters. So Mel Coco is basically the easiest way to Soul Blast. It's the easiest way to convert our Soul into Cyclist, so we can get our Persona right, you can get our Kyber, you can get any. It just quickly gets you to any single piece that you need in this deck, because this is a piece reliant deck. And then speaking of boosters, we have the grade 1 from set 7, which is basically a 13k. If your opponent is grade 3 or greater, it gains 5k. So not only is it a 13k attacker, it's also a 13k booster. So because we are playing a grade 2 dominant deck, any time that you can see her, call her, because she's makes very, very strong columns that when they gain 20k will hit for very, very hard numbers for your opponent to guard, and then that pressures your opponent very hard later on in the game. Even in early game, even when you go first, even when you go second, it still makes a 23k column. So it's already going to be very strong and hard for your opponent to guard, just like that anyways. It is definitely useful for this deck. As for our grade 0s, we have one copy of one starter, which is we choose the Tigra starter. One over trigger, we're using the Keter Sanctuary over trigger. 3 front, 8 crit, and 4 heal. So I know a starter is starter, just use whichever starter you want. Over trigger. The main you can actually make the argument to use the crit elemental OT, because Gramgrace already makes columns very strong, and then if you hit the over trigger, that means that your center back row can also be very, very hard to guard, because usually your Gramgrace and your center back row are usually the weakest numbers of all of them, because they have no boosters behind them. So if you hit the Great Elemental, the Obaria, they both pump up to 100 million, then that will basically seal the deal for your opponent, because there's 4 attacks that they basically cannot PG or die. But the main reason is that this deck, for now, without the promo, cannot really plus as heavily as it wants to or as it should, especially since we also opted not to play some cards like Sadie, which is a Gramgrace card that we got in this set. But then I've just felt that your Color Blast is better spent elsewhere, as well as you don't want to damage choke yourself to 3 damage, which is a very, very very bad damage point to be, because you're one crit away from dying to Tigra. No, 1 crit away from dying to Gravidia, you're 1 crit away from dying to Eva, and you're of course 2 crits away from dying to Chrono Jet, which they will hit. They will definitely hit. So more drive checks, of course, always will be good to alleviate from that. We play fronts because despite what I said earlier, this deck already is quite close to decking out, and it already and it also is reliant on having full board. So since you have full boards, you might as well capitalize on having full boards by having front triggers. And 20k shield, of course, nobody can complain about 20k shields in the 5k format. We play 8 crits because, as you can see, this deck has absolutely no crit pressure. So if you want to take your opponent to 6 instead of just 5, you play crits. It's as simple as that. And you play 4 heals because this is card 5 Vanguard. And that is all for the set 8 Gramgrace deck profile. As much as I was very hyped for this deck, I have to really temper my expectations, because Gramgrace is not the savior of Keter Sanctuary. It's not the savior for people that cannot afford Youthberg. It's just a very, very strong mid-range Keter Sanctuary deck that can make use of cards that have been otherwise forgotten by time, and has been forgotten by, as better support has come out. As for whether you should play Gramgrace, I definitely think that it's a very, very fun deck to play around with, especially if you have been collecting Keter cards from the past 2 sets. I mean, as you can see, we are not playing a single card in this deck that is double rare or higher that has not come out from set 6 onwards. Your PGs got reprinted. Now Coco is a common. You really cannot complain as to the buildability about this deck. So definitely it's a deck that you can check out, but you should keep an eye out for later on, because we may have something special for people that want to upgrade their Gramgrace a bit more. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.